Our live Lockdown Lowdown Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama guest this afternoon is a Welsh soprano with a global reputation. Born in Pontrhydyfen, the village famed as the birthplace of Richard Burton and Ivor Emanuel, she originally worked as a nurse before deciding on a career in music, and she went on to become a student at the Guildhall School of Music in London. Since then, she has gone to sing major operatic roles with companies all over the world, singing for companies including Welsh National Opera, of course, Royal Opera Covent Garden, Bayerische Staatsoper in Munich, Deutsche Staatsoper in Berlin. She's made a name for herself in the USA, singing with Santa Fe, Chicago Lyric, San Francisco Opera, and many times singing at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. Her many roles have included Contessa Almaviva in La Notte di Figaro, Despina in Così van tutte, Mimi in La Bohème, Pamina in The Magic Flute, the governess in Turn of the Screw, both Nanetta and Alice Ford in Falstaff, Romilda in Xerxes, Ginevra in Ariodante, Ilia in Idomeneo, Liu in Turandot, Gretel in Hansel and Gretel, and Angelica in Orlando. Concert appearances have included the Salzburg, Edinburgh, Tanglewood and Ravinia festivals, and she is a regular guest at the BBC Proms. A prolific recording artist, her recordings include many complete operas and a solo recording of Italian songs for EMI. She's also recorded 3 principal soprano parts in Sir Charles Mackerras's Telarc series of Gilbert and Sullivan operettas, The Plaintiff in Trial by Jury, Mabel in The Pirates of Penzance, and Josephine in HMS Pinafore. But it was for her recording of Gretel in Hansel and Gretel with Sir Charles Mackerras that she won that most coveted of recording awards, a Grammy. She sang Belinda in the BBC film of Dido and Aeneas and has hosted the BBC television series A Touch of Classics with the BBC National Orchestra of Wales. Rebecca is a trustee of the Colwinston Charitable Trust and patron of several charities, among them Ty Hapus, Music in Hospitals Cymreig, the Allowed Charity, and she is a vice president of Shelter Cymru, the homelessness charity. Rebecca is an honorary fellow of our very own Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama and an honorary Doctor of Music at both the Universities of Wales and the University of Glamorgan. She was also made an honorary member of the Gorsedd of the Bards for her contribution to music and Wales. Rebecca, with all of that, you must be exhausted. Thank you for making the time to be with us this afternoon. Gorgeous as ever.
Thank you for inviting me, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here and to see everyone.
Oh, it's really, we're chuffed to bits. Rebecca, first, before we go on to talk about your many, many achievements, I'd just love to know how lockdown has been for you and how you've been keeping musically and artistically satisfied through this difficult time.
Well, it's been fine, actually. Today is day 107 of lockdown. And when I mean lockdown, we really have locked down because we are shielding my husband because he has a medical condition that needs protection. So we made a decision on March the 12th that none of us, that includes my son, of course, Stephen, and our cat, we were not to leave the building. And it's been fine. We've had a lot of support from friends through Zoom, which has been incredible. I've discovered a love for baking again, and which has certainly expanded waistlines in all 4 of us. I've discovered an absolute passion for gardening, and I didn't know I could grow potatoes and tomatoes and cucumbers and chilies. And that has been joyous. Musically, I listen to something new every day. I've been trying to listen to some new artists. I have an absolute passion, as I know you do too, for the countertenor voice. And I discovered my favourite discovery this week and last week. It has been Max Emanuel Cencic, who many of you might be aware. He was the 12-year-old boy in the Vienna Staats in the choir, children's choir that sang Queen of the Night at pitch. And suddenly he has developed into this most glorious countertenor, and he is my current obsession. So I'm listening to something new every day.
Well, that's a brilliant thing to be able to set in your task to do that. And I think a lot of us have been finding that despite the restrictions and the real difficulties we've all been facing, having that extra time to reconnect and listen to new stuff, read new stuff has been positive. So Yeah, and you've been giving me that recommendation of Chenchich, and I will certainly take it up because, as you know, I'm a mutual fan of the countertenor. One of the things that has been most remarkable about the lockdown period has been the way that the UK has really shown a renewed respect for the NHS.
Yes.
And that's where you began your career.
Yes.
You were a nurse. And I'd love you to talk to us a little bit about that, and to ask you really, if you had your time over, would you have gone straight into music, or would you have done the nursing again?
I can answer the second part of the question immediately. No, I definitely would have done the nursing again. It was such a vital part of my development as a human being, and also I figured if I could deal with some of the tricky surgeons that I dealt with during my 5 years in Morrison Hospital, I could deal with any opera producer or conductor. Of course, when I was in school, it was a choice of music or biology for GCSE. They're not O-levels any longer. And I desperately wanted to be a singer, even at that young age. But my father actually, fortunately, had a very level head on his shoulders and said, look, you need to do something that you can have a career with. Whoever makes a career in singing. Well, I thought maybe he's right. I knew no different, apart from the fact my mother had been a professional opera singer and was one of the original singers in the Ivor Novello company and in the original D'Oyly Cart company. She was also a soprano, and she really tried to dissuade me from being a singer because she said it's an absolute rat race. You know, you'll hate it, the digs are dreadful, you know, this and that and the other. And my father said, look, if you want to do it eventually, you have to have a career which you can fall back on. And I was obsessed by a television program many years ago, which some of you might remember, called The Body in Question, which was introduced by Dr. Jonathan Miller. And he was a fascinating chap, and my goodness, you know, went on. He became the most incredible opera director, and I did many productions with him. And he was my inspiration. I thought, well, what can I do? I'd got a place in Swansea University to study psychology. And I thought, that might be quite difficult to get out of. But on the other hand, my singing lessons with Jason Shute were in Swansea University. So I thought maybe I could, you know, meld them both together. But I thought, no, my real love is medicine. And I didn't want to be a doctor. Then maybe I should have been, who knows. But I thought I'll become a nurse. And it was so fortuitous. I was sent to train in Morriston Hospital. And 2 years into my training, I was still a student nurse, and one of the chief nursing officers, who was the conductor of the hospital choir, came to find me because he heard that, you know, I was singing as an amateur, and said, would you like to come and audition for my choir? And I said, oh no, Mr. Thomas, I said, I either come as the soloist or I don't come at all.
Did you really?
I did. I was so cheeky. So he said, okie dokie. He said, what time is your break tomorrow? I said, well, I'm on the afternoon shift, so it'll be between 5 and 6. So he said, right, come down to the chapel and Doreen will come and she'll play the piano for you and you can audition. And if you're any good, I'll take you on as our soloist. So I went and I took the dual song from Faust and Summertime. And I even took a little Wolf song, Mausfallensprüchlein. And I sang the whole lot, and they agreed there and then that it would be okay for me to be their soloist. And 2 weeks later, I was invited to sing in a concert in the Sacred Heart Centre with them and the Morrison Orpheus Choir. They were doing a joint concert. And then that introduced me to Alwyn Humphreys and the Morrison Orpheus Choir, who totally took me under their wing and set me up really for, you know, where I am now. It's a long story, isn't it?
Well, it's a brilliant story, and I'd love to know whether you actually sang the Wolf in any of those concerts, or did they just want the Summertime and the dual song?
Funnily enough, the Wolf was never requested, but it's a delightful little song, and it's very useful.
Yes, yeah. So, deciding to give up nursing when you clearly had a skill and a passion, you became a theatre sister, didn't you, in the hospital? how was it making that decision to decide to give all of that up and put your eggs in an operatic basket?
Well, in many ways, it was very easy. My main obstacle was my mother. But I was performing as an amateur in an annual concert in the Sacred Heart Centre in Skewen. And I remember I had a terrible car accident about 6 weeks before, and I was still in plaster and had a whole host of various injuries. So it was me limping up to the pulpit and everything. But in the rehearsal in the afternoon, there was also a young boy singing. And I thought he was the accompanist's son to begin with. And then he walked into the pulpit and she played the opening few bars of Lord God of Abraham. And it turned out to be Bryn Terfel. And he was then studying at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Well, I nearly fainted when I heard his voice because I'd never heard anything quite like it before or since in my life, really. And he asked me, what I did for a living. And I said I was a nurse and I was junior theatre sister and I loved my job. And he thought I was an absolute fool because I needed to go to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama and I needed to go to study with Laura Sarti and I needed to do it now. And I turned to him and I said, okay. Then I applied for the Guildhall School of Music and Drama without telling my parents. Bear in mind, I was 22. I'd never been to London, actually, Tim, apart from a school trip to Harrods once. And the day I'd organised with a young lady who had babysat me, and she was the secretary of the Hotel Intercontinental manager in London from Pontrhydyfen. And we'd been in touch, and I was, we'd planned that I was going to go up, going to stay with her, told a total fib to my mum and dad that I was just going to have a little break. And of course, it was the audition, and I'd almost got away with it. But on the day of my going to London, lovely Linda, my babysitter, had sent a good luck postcard and it landed on the mat, and my mother had obviously picked it up and read it. And as I walked down the stairs, she was there with arms folded and the postcard in her hand. And she said, and the meaning of this is, because it was good luck for the audition at Guildhall and hope it goes really well. So had to explain everything. Then my father didn't take me to the station, so I walked to the station, went off to London, sang to Noel Barker, Bernie Dickinson and John Hosier, who was then the principal. And they said, well, we'd love you to come to Guildhall. And I said, well, that's really lovely. I said, but I only want to come as a part-time student. And because I'm a nurse and I love my job. And they said, well, you either come as a full-time student or not at all. And we'd like to give you the entrance scholarship. And I said, no, I can't come as a full-time student. And they said, why? Because I said, my mother won't let me. And Noel Barker said, could I call your mother? I said, oh, no. She's only discovered I'm coming today, so please, no.
So you went as a part-time student?
No, I went home and actually my father was in the car park waiting. He'd been there 5 hours waiting for me, not knowing what train I was coming back on, but he was there and didn't speak to me at all, apart from when we got to our home. He said, your mother's in the front room. And I knew if my mother was in the front room, it was serious. And the worst thing was of all, my mother was smoking in the front room because that was completely forbidden. And I went in and she said, sit down. And I can see her now, arms crossed, apart from this cigarette there. And she said, well, and I said, well, the audition went very well. They've given me a place. And in fact, they've given me a scholarship. And she burst into tears and she said, I knew they would. She said, I'm so proud of you. And that was the turning point. And they were so supportive. They traveled all over the world to see me, to America. My mother had never been on a plane because she was so terrified of flying. And they came to San Francisco, Santa Fe and New York. And it was, we added to each other's lives considerably, actually.
Well, that's gorgeous. And your mother being a singer, she must have known, actually, that when you have that bug and you have that talent, that you were only going to be really satisfied by...
Yes.
And
Tim, sorry to interrupt. Not only was it a bug, it was a fire burning inside me. And it's still burning. It's not as fierce as it was because, 30 years later, it's been, I've had a really lovely, eventful career, but the fire is still there. It's still, the embers, ignite occasionally, but that was a fire burning in me, really, from probably the age of 5 or 6, when I started listening to my mother's recordings of Joan Sutherland and my father's symphonic recordings. It was really there then, and it was an absolute need, and probably the best way I've ever been able to express myself.
Well, and we're very glad you did, because we've enjoyed you expressing yourself for a long time. And the first time I ever heard you, and I'd love to take you back to this production, was when you sang Ilia in, was it 1992, 1993 at Welsh?
91.
91.
Yes.
And I'll never forget this moment when you were singing Tefireti, and you were downstage centre, and there were rose petals all over on the floor, and you were, this curtain went up and revealed you in this, and as you got onto the Dave Allah, the coloratura moment, you spun around on, I think is it a G sharp or what? I can't remember. And these rose petals all lifted up and started circling around you just because the dress. And I've never ever forgotten that image of you surrounded by rose petals singing this glorious, glorious aria. You've sung so much Mozart in your career, but it's famously difficult. Everyone says it's for our young singers here. How important do you think having Mozart in the repertoire is?
It's critical, really. It's been the real salt and pepper, cream, everything in my career. But it's more than anything. It's like a balsam for the vocal cords. It keeps everything calm. It sounds so simple, but it is probably one of the composers to do justice to, I think, really. And my goodness, we all deserve to do, our best for Mozart, because his music is just sublime, whether it's orchestral, chamber, vocal, leader. His music is just unbelievable. And I think, as a young singer, I think a combination certainly of Mozart and Handel is critical in everyone's repertoire. And I always love it when somebody says, "Oh, could I sing a Mozart aria to you?" And I think, my heart just goes, "Oh, thank goodness, this is somebody that understands, the importance of not stretching the voice and one's capabilities too soon, because we're all tempted. My goodness, by all means, have a good go at Unvaldi, but just do it in the bath and not anywhere else, really, at early stages in your career. Mozart is vital."
And I've been so fortunate to see you sing on so many occasions, and I've seen you sing Mimi, and then years after singing Mimi, singing Rodelinda, and going back to Handel, and do you think that's been key in keeping your voice sounding as fresh as it is always checking in and keeping your voice in the place to be able to sing the coloratura that you'd need for Handel, or sing that clarity?
Yes. I think, looking back, would I have done Mimi again if I'd been able to repeat that point of my career? And I might have said, no, I wouldn't have done it again, because it was actually a notch too heavy for me. I sang it with my voice and within my capabilities, but it wasn't something I ever felt totally comfortable with. I loved the last act. I loved Act 3. I mean, my goodness me, it's just glorious music. I found the first aria so difficult. John Dilieta, different kettle of fish, much easier. But the first aria, settling that first aria, I was never comfortable that I did the music justice, because it was just it was a notch too heavy for my voice. But my teacher, Laura Sarti, whom I mentioned earlier, she's now 96 and on spectacular form still. And we've always worked, in the way that if we go a little bit beyond, we always have to come back and slim it down again, but always keeping that spin and that, constant vibrato, not a fast vibrato, but, just the spin of the voice, constant, so that, it never develops holes in it and becomes wobbly. And Handel is fantastic for keeping voices on a straight and narrow and focused, like a beam of light, really, and we mustn't deviate out of it.
You talk about your lifelong lessons with Laura, and Kiri was with us on Monday, Grace Bunbury yesterday, and all of you great singers have talked so much about the importance of regular lessons, technical awareness, always listening to your voice, as in not listening to the voices you're singing, as in listening to what your voice is telling you is healthy, and when your voice is feeling good, listening to the soul of your voice, I guess. You have always kept up your lessons right the way through your career, haven't you? Yes,
and I have to say, had we not been going through this lockdown, I have to say I probably would have whizzed down to Lewis to have had a lesson with her. We talk every single day, and I think the most important thing in a relationship for a teacher and a student is a mutual respect. And I think Laura and I have always had that. My God, I've taken every role to her that I've ever sung. Doesn't matter how tricky, how small, how big. There have been some things, concept-wise, that I haven't always been able to take to her. But if there's a role, I've always gone through it with her. I go through it with a coach first, and I always take a notebook with me if I'm coaching with Michael or David George, or Michael Pollock or David George. I take my notepad with me, and if there are any areas that are tricky technically for me, I write them down in my notepad, and then when I go for my lesson, we work through every point until I'm comfortable. And she's just incredible. Usually she has a special little trick up her sleeve, to relax me. And actually, when you're relaxed, you can do a lot more anyway. And she's just incredible. But I think, Tim, it's come from a mutual respect from each other, and I still need her in my life, even though we've been together for 35 years nearly, and oh yes, we have been together for 35 years, and it's been the most incredible, rewarding, fulfilling relationship.
That's just wonderful to hear, and I think for all young musicians who are in the room here, just knowing that you don't get to that stage when you just I know everything now, I don't need it, I can just do it myself. And sometimes as well as when it costs money and you're concerned about that, there's a temptation maybe not to continue.
It's tricky, and you feel when you've left a musical institution or conservatoire or wherever you've been studying, you think I know it all now, I don't need lessons anymore. But it's actually then that you really need to consolidate your technique, to consolidate your knowledge of languages. And, we should all be listening to various recordings. We don't want to copy people, of course, but stylistically listen to people that have experienced, a long career, and they have a wealth of knowledge and experience in various fields of music.
Well, the important thing for this discussion is that our students get the chance to speak to you, and Freya has put a question in the chat box. Freya, over to you to speak to Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Freya, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you. I recently enjoyed watching Jonathan Miller's Kazee with you as Despina.
Oh, thank you.
Thought it was amazing that you sang most of the Act 1 finale with a surgical mask on.
And
I wondered if you had any other stories of tricky costumes or props that you had to contend with.
There are several tricky props and costumes I've had throughout my career, I have to say. That was one of the hardest ones, because with the mask on, every time I took a breath in, the mask would go into my mouth. So it was quite tricky, but who knows, maybe that's the way of opera to come. We'll all sing from behind masks, but it can be done. I think the worst thing for me is having to light a cigarette on stage, because if I'm concentrating on music, I find I'm not a smoker and I abhor smoking. And trying to light cigarettes is always the hardest thing. A strange thing that happened to me first opening night at Santa Fe in A Marriage of Figaro, beautiful production by the glorious John Cox. The Figaro had to lift me as Susanna into the air, but we had to sort of do a little, this is very Welsh, tutty down first before he could lift me up. And he stood on my hem, and he was a big 6'4" Florida boy. And the hem just came completely away, and I was standing there just in my undergarments and under my blouse, and my skirt was in bits on the floor.
Did you laugh?
Oh, we laughed, and of course the conductor was hysterical, as were most of the audience, I have to say. So I had to finish the scene, bunched it up, held on to it, and finished the act, and then had a costume change off, obviously, after Act 2. But there wasn't much time, if I remember, because it was on a fabulous revolve. Act 1 and 2 were on this revolve, and Act 3 and 4 were on the revolve after the interval. But there wasn't much time to change. But definitely Santa Fe saw my undies that evening.
It's quite appropriate for Susanna and Figaro to be caught in flagrante like that, though, I think.
Well, exactly. They were there measuring the bed anyway, so you know.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for that, Rebecca. Right, there's lots of questions popping into the question box now, and on the Freya just mentioned Jonathan Miller, and Madeline has a question about this. Maddie, where are you?
Hi, Rebecca. Hello. Thanks, Tim. Jonathan.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Jonathan Miller is a bit of a hero of mine, and I was wondering what was it like to work with him, and in comparison to other directors, do you have a favourite director you work with?
Well, he was a very special chap, and I think I'd mentioned earlier, that The Body in Question, which was a television series when I was growing up, was a television series that he had hosted. And he knew that I was a nurse and he was a doctor, so we had medicine in common anyway. And I have to say, he was just so entertaining. He was hysterically funny because he'd been in The Goons, and his anecdotes, we got very, very little work done, I have to say, on it. How we ever got a production finished, I really don't know, because we'd spend most of the day laughing, and we loved it. Whenever he left the auditorium to come onto the stage to give us a special point, we absolutely loved it, because we knew we'd have real hilarity and a joyous time with him. So he's one of my favourites. I mentioned John Cox, with whom I had did Figaro and my American debut, and also my debut at the Met. He was a wonderful director. But I very much enjoy working with Sir David McVicar. I've been fortunate to do several of his productions, and I find him such an interesting man, and he always seems to bring out the best in me as an actress. And I just find I love the acting side of things, and it's challenging, but it is so rewarding and fulfilling. So they probably are my top 3, and apologies to everyone else that I've worked with that I haven't mentioned. I've probably enjoyed everything I've done.
Sure. And so can I just really quick, when you say he brings out the best in you, can you describe how, is there a particular thing that helps you bring it out, or is it just different for every piece and every role?
Well, he always looks at us as individuals. He's never stereotyped. When we did Turn of the Screw at ENO, I remember one Saturday morning, he was directing Dame Anne Murray and myself at a table when she was telling me about Peter Quint. And he was kneeling down at one end of the table. We were sitting opposite each other. And he was asking us questions about our characters. And, we were creating, but also working on our backstories, where we'd come from, why were we there, how would we got there, how did we feel at this particular moment. And he just knew how to unlock various emotions within us. But we had to work very hard. We had to listen. We had to respect each other. We had to certainly respect him, because nobody knows the score he's always so well prepared. He knows every note, he knows every word, regardless of which language it's in. And when he is as well prepared as he is, also, you know, I do a lot of reading before I get to the stage part of being in a production. And I always read as much as I possibly can about the era the piece was written in. You know, if there's an original manuscript, read that. You know, read the libretto of the opera, and you know, then we know we can bounce off each other and discover the nitty-gritty inside elements of each and every character.
Okay, thank you.
Madeline is one of our MA opera directing students. So,
oh, wonderful!
Yeah, it's a new course at the college, and I think that relationship of the singer to the director is so important. It's
critical, because they can make or break you, really. So now, did you have a favourite director?
Richard Jones.
Yeah, I've enjoyed working with him very much as well, I must say. Yes, very much indeed.
I'm going to come to another of our opera directing students now, Fleur Snow, who is in the room. So there you go, Fleur. Speak to Rebecca.
It's so exciting to talk to you. I can't say how exciting it is. It really.
Lovely to see you, Fleur.
Having heard you talk about character, and I want to ask loads more questions about that. But my original question was actually more of a broad one, in terms of, you've seen so many opera houses and opera in so many countries and in so many different states. What do you think, post-coronavirus, when we've rebuilt and we're all back doing what we love, what would you like to see change in opera? And also, particularly as a Welsh person, perhaps in Wales and from a Welsh perspective, what would you like to see new and different in the future?
I think it's going to be very different when we're all permitted to be on the glorious stages of the opera houses around the world. I think we have to look back on the evolution of opera and how did it all start? Where were the grassroots? And it all really started with the Commedia dell'arte. These were small groups of people that got together and performed, whether they were performing prose or opera or chamber music or whatever, but they were in small groups. And I really think we will have to start to do something like that again, because we will need to have something that people can relate to again. I think the time of the big lavish production is over for now. I think opera will really need to be about real music and drama rather than the spectacle. I think in time it will return to the glorious days that we've experienced, and my goodness, some of the productions we've seen have been just sensational and will continue to be. But I think for now, I think groups will have to be smaller. I think we will have to certainly return. We have some performances of Handel and Mozart and Benjamin Britten, Monteverdi. We have to look back, you know, at the smaller groups. And in Wales, my goodness me, who knows? We've got that gorgeous theatre. We've got two incredible orchestras in the city, two big professional orchestras. We've got an incredible music college, which I'm proud to be associated. And I think it'll just be very interesting to see how we progress and how we have the confidence to progress in the future. It's about confidence. It's of course about safety. We have to make sure that, you know, the people that we attract are still of all age groups. And in doing that, I don't think we should ensure everything is directed for the 20 and 30-year-olds. We have to consider our loyal opera goers that have been there through the thick and thin with us. So I don't think opera should become flippant in any way. I think it needs total and utter respect in whichever way we start doing it again. But let's hope it's soon, because golly, you know, the human voice is the first instrument and it deserves not to be silent.
What gorgeous words. And yeah, let's hope there's a lot less silence very soon. But one thing, and I've been asking this of a lot of our guests this week, one thing that seems to have really happened in a genuine and unforced way is that there has been opera on telly. There has been, opera has been released on YouTube, and people seem to have been engaging with it. I was listening to somebody on the radio just the other day who knew nothing about opera, but he discovered the Liebestod from Tristan und Isolde and couldn't understand why every time he listened to this, he burst into tears. And it just made this impact on him. And I do hope that this time that we've had to try new things might have sparked an interest in some new audience members.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm sure it will have, actually, because I think, as you said, these people hearing opera for the first time, you know, in some cases, my goodness me, how can it not fail to move you, really? My son plays, you know, some ghastly music at times, but also, you know, he sat down and he watched the Così that I did, and the Magic Flute that I did was on last week, and you know, it was lovely because last Friday night, for instance, I didn't know it was on, but the Magic Flute that I did from Covent Garden had 51,000 people watching it. That's not bad.
No, that's you know, it's a lot more than would have been in Covent Garden on that night.
Yes, so, I think it's hopeful, Tim. You know, and you know, if that's how we can tempt them back into the opera house, you know, then you know when it's safe to do so, you know, that's what we have to do. You know, we do, mind you, a Wagnerian orchestration is pretty expansive.
Yeah, we'll need a football stadium for Tristan, but
yes, we will.
But maybe we can do, you know, Albert Herring or something. Yeah, and soon, I hope. Serena, are you there? Can I ask you to speak now, please?
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. It's good to see you.
Lovely to see you.
So my question, earlier on you were talking about how much you like it when people bring along Mozart to sing. And I'm wondering, what other things get you excited when you're working with young singers?
I have to say, the thing that really gets me excited is to see how passionate the student is to begin with. And you can tell from the moment they stand up. You can tell when you're looking at them sitting down in the room whether they're interested and whether they have an absolute passion and love for what they're doing. I respect any singer that brings anything. I really, really do. I'm just all delighted that you have a love of classical music because, you know, my goodness me, without classical music, the world would be such a barren place. So I love it, you know, when you bring Lieder, when you bring Handel, when you bring Mozart, Britten, any art song, you know, you can even bring ABBA if it's something you're passionate about. Bring it, you know, as long as the passion is in your soul and in your heart. That's what gives me real satisfaction.
Rebecca, I shared with you our students' version of Dancing Queen.
It was amazing.
Wasn't it great? Yeah. See, that's another lovely thing that's come out of lockdown.
It was glorious. I sent it to various of my friends of mine. Well, I told them about the link, and they all said they were dancing around the kitchen, and it just made them so happy. And it was a glorious experience. I adored it.
Grace, are you there? Can I ask you to come in now, please, with your question?
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. I'm doing one of your activities and baking currently, so excuse my probably chocolate all over me.
What are you making?
I'm doing keto, so no sugar. So I'm making a sugar-free, carb-free cake to celebrate my results.
Lovely. So if there's no sugar, no carbs, what's in it? Almonds?
There's fake sugar.
Oh.
Chocolate, and then you just whisk eggs, lots and lots of eggs.
We'll be around.
Congratulations on your results.
Thank you very much.
We'll be around at 4:30.
Yes, please do. I've got too much anyway. I recently was working on the role of Despina, and we watched your wonderful, wonderful performance, and I just wondered what your approach was to the different voices of the different characters.
Oh golly, it's really interesting. again, you don't want everybody to sound the same. You know, doctor had to sound quite authoritative. And then, of course, I did the lawyer with a real dreadful Italian, you know, English Italian accent. But that was something I discovered myself because, I tried it the first time and it made everybody laugh. And I love comedy more than anything. And I thought, oh, okay. And I thought, I've got to get it through the Italian coach, Maria Cleva, you know, and she is quite a stickler, the most wonderful coach. And I thought, if she'd let me do it, then it would be fine. And my soprano was in the pit the first time, and even he laughed, and they let me do it. So it was just looking, you know, you think, how would a doctor speak? He'd be very authoritative. So, I directed it in the way I thought a doctor might work, and then a fake lawyer, you know, a fake accent for a fake lawyer. But isn't it such a fun role?
Oh my goodness, it's been just the joy of this year. Such a delight.
She is a glorious character, isn't she?
Oh yeah, completely. On that note of her being glorious, I feel like often we're pushed to move to bigger rep and move to me and things like that. What would your advice be on staying true to your sort of your natural voice?
I've always erred on the side of caution personally, and I think maybe that's why 32 years later I'm still singing, and I've been really lucky. But I've always listened to my singing teacher's advice, and I had a wonderful relationship with my ENT consultant as well, and always went for regular checkups because I was always very cautious. He boasted once that he treated Bonnie Tyler. I said, Mr. Bahari, I said, perhaps you shouldn't boast about that. But it's the huskiness which we all adore with Bonnie, and he was very, very proud of it and proud that she was his patient. But I think for me, I always err on the side of caution, and I think obviously it's your relationship between you and your teacher, but also trust your gut instinct. If you feel something is a little, doesn't fit, and it has to fit like a glove, and you must never feel pushed or strained in any way. It's vital that you're comfortable and that it just feels like speech. You know, of course, there are extensions, you know, that can be challenging in a role, but I think basically it needs to feel like a velvet glove.
Would you say that's when you know something is going to be right, or moving into bigger things when you get older?
I don't like to say bigger things. I mean, may I ask how old you are now?
I'm 23.
23. Well, I hadn't even gone to Guildhall at 23. And
completely.
Probably didn't do Mimi for 15 years after that. But, you know, I was, as we said originally, you know, primarily a Mozart, Handel singer with Britain and Janacek thrown in as well, and Gilbert and Sullivan. But I think really, you know, look at listen to other singers, you know, and look, what were they doing at that stage in your career? Just don't be too eager to you know, really gallop before you can canter beautifully. You know, I think really just take it easy. There's so much to sing out there. There is so much music. It would take us, I don't know how many lifetimes to get through it all, really. But just take it easy and always listen to your teacher and your gut instinct, and you know, just be careful, really.
Rebecca,
thank you so much.
Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Rebecca, can I ask you about the changing voice and how you were talking then about not necessarily going on to bigger things, but you know, I remember seeing you sing Sophie in Rosenkavalier 20 plus years ago, and then more recently seeing you sing the Marschallin. How have you coped with the physical changes of the voice as it gets more mature?
Well, again, I think because I've constantly trained with Laura, and I've learned a lot about the characters. You know, I did Susanna, Countess, Nanetta, Alice, Sophie, Marschallin, and I've learned by watching a lot of singers that have gone before me. You know, when I've been doing Sophie, who was singing the Marshallin, it was Fleming, it was Kenny, it was Flott, it was, you know, Charles Duda. I was so lucky. I had some of the best Marshallins in the world, really. And the same, you know, when I did Nanita, who was singing Alice, and, you know, I looked, and I knew one day it would happen, because I was never a typical soubrette. I was always a light lyric soprano, that I knew as I matured would be perhaps capable of moving into the next stage of, you know, of I don't like to call it weight, of colour.
We've had a question from Crystal, who can't be with us, but she asked me to ask this question, which is kind of a similar note to what we've been talking about. She says, you've kept singing the lighter lyric repertoire throughout your career, but you must have had a lot of offers to sing heavier repertoire. So I'm reading from Crystal's note, as famous as you are. So I was wondering what your perspective is on having not given into that. She says she remembers singing Fior di Ligi for you, and you said your voice would never be big enough for you, after which you perfectly demonstrated several phrases from the aria. So I guess it's how have you managed to not give in to temptation?
Well, gosh, you know, if there was one role I would have absolutely killed to have sang, and I was offered several times, would be Butterfly, because, you know, being only 5'1.5", I was a perfect size for a little geisha girl. But, you know, when you think of the marathon singing that poor Butterfly has to go through, and the emotional journey that she takes on, I mean, my goodness me, I'm really glad I didn't do it, but it would be my desert island opera completely. And I'm not saying that there isn't at least once a month where I sing through the whole role when I'm in the kitchen, and I love every second of it. But it is very tempting. I was offered Fior di Ligi, Covent Garden, several times, and I turned it down because I just didn't think I looked like a Fior di Ligi. You know, I would look like a Despina, but I don't know, there's something about a Fior di Ligi, and my goodness me, those ensembles sit in such a high tessitura, you know. I'm a lazy soprano. I like to go up to the high notes, and I like to come straight back down again. I've never been one to sort of sit there and hover forever, you know. Okay, Sophie hovered quite high, you know, in quite a high position, particularly in Presentation of the Rose. That C sharp, it felt like an F. But, you know, I've been a bit of a coward, I think, with some things. I probably could have gone and done a little more. I was offered Constanza in the Staatsoper in Munich, turned that down, didn't want to do Blonde ever. That always terrified me, even though I had, in those days, up to an F. E flat was really my limit. So I probably could have pushed myself a little further and harder with roles such as Fior di Ligi, but I'm glad I haven't, because I don't think, Tim, I would be singing now had I gone down that road, because, you know, I'm very cautious, and I don't want to say boring, because my roles certainly haven't been boring. I've loved every single one of them, but perhaps I could have pushed myself a little further, but I've been a little bit lazy and content to sit here and do what I've done.
Rebecca, I would never ever describe you as lazy, and I'm also just bemused by you saying you always came down as soon as you possibly can, because if anyone has that facility to float and sit up there and spin pianissimi notes for days, it's you. But
floating is different, but if I had to do a sustained high C or a high D, the high D in Hansel and Gretel, you know, when Gretel wakes up, that was really about it for me. And I only ever recorded one E flat in the Pyrus of Penzance recording with Maceras. And I was really glad when we did about 3 takes on it, and I nailed it every time, and I thought, right, don't want to do that ever again.
It's about knowing your voice, isn't it? You know, yesterday we were talking, the joy of talking with Grace Bunbury, and she was talking about singing Eberly at 23 at Paris Opera, and singing Venus in Tannhäuser at 24 in Bayreuth. But hers was just a different voice.
The different instruments, the different body. You know, ethnically, we're different. I would love somebody to do a study on voice types, voice nationalities. Russian vocal cords, it's different. Whether it's the size of the larynx, the size of the head, sinuses are different. So the resonance is going to be different. I would love somebody, and I think you should do it, Tim, to do a program about looking at Bunbury's vocal cords, looking at Fleming's vocal cords, looking at the great, Russian soprano vocal cords. You can have mine Welsh vocal cords if you want them. But I would just love somebody to anatomically look at the larynx and, have examples of all these singers. Yes, she could sing it at 24. And my goodness me, it was just sublime. But the makeup of the woman, the makeup of her was so different,
And it's that thing with human nature that we so often all want what we don't have.
Yeah.
I think just great singers who have these long careers are examples of people who are cautious, who do make those good choices. And one of the things that Kiri said on Monday was one of the most important things you can learn to say is no.
Yes.
But that's not always easy, is it? Particularly when you're starting out in your career and you get a nice offer and you want to do it.
Of course, and it's money in the bank.
Yeah.
And it pays for whether it pays for your singing lessons or your rent or dinner. It is terribly tempting. But then also you don't want to have a reputation of saying no all the time, because nobody will ask you to do anything. But you've just really got to be able to balance it up really well and trust in the advice that you're given by your manager and your agent, and just hope you're not doing something that is going to be detrimental to the state of your vocal cords and the longevity of your career. But gosh, it's just one of those tempting things that it's like the apple on the tree in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. Of all the roles in your glorious and illustrious career, is there a favourite?
Susanna, without a doubt, Marriage of Figaro.
And what is it about Susanna that you particularly loved?
Because I found it was one of the first operas I ever heard when I was 11. All my friends for their birthday were having, whichever rock star was in trend, recordings of them. And for my 11th birthday, my father bought me the Carl Byrne Mozart recordings of Zauberflirt, Don Giovanni and the Marriage of Figaro. And I have to say, when I heard, number one, the overture of Marriage of Figaro, I thought I was transcended immediately. And I thought, oh my goodness, if the opera is anything as good as the overture, then we're in for a treat. And the character of Susanna, I mean, she is just the most grounded, down-to-earth, incredible, warm, organized, loving, caring person with the glorious aria at the end, that we've waited all night for. Okay, it's Dove Sono that gets the big applause, but the sheer beauty of singing, I mean, there's nothing to compare, with the De Vieni non tardar aria at the end. And I just couldn't wait to get there every evening, and just sing it, because it is just so sublime. It's the hardest aria in the world. You could spend it, 6 months on the recitation. And probably with all the coaches I had over the years, I probably did. But it is, it is the rose, the rose on the crown.
You just talked about Susanna, and you've also sung Contessa, Sophie, Marceline, Nonetta, Alice. Have you ever come in with the wrong line?
Yes. The hard, not in yes, I have in all of them actually. Yeah, I have. Not in performance, but in rehearsal, there were several Nonetta lines that I just came in with, because, Falstaff is such a conversational piece anyway. And, oh my goodness me. Yeah, I made mistakes all the time. And Susanna, Contessa.
Oh. Rebecca, we've come to the end of our hour. It's just flown by, and I'm so grateful for you for giving us your time and for enabling us to spend an hour with you. Well, we're all in this strange new environment we're all living in when we can't leave our own homes. But I'm ending every one of these chats with a little quickfire round of questions.
Okay.
50-50, I'm going to force you to make a choice, I'm afraid.
Oh, no.
So, tenors or countertenors?
Countertenors.
Opera house or recital room?
Opera house.
Susanna or Contessa?
Susanna.
4 last songs or final trio from Rosencavalier?
Ooh, 4 last songs.
Caviar or crisps?
Crisps. Every time. Marks and Spencer's beef and onion, my very favourite.
Oh, Rebecca, thank you so much. From all of us at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama, a huge round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I just want everybody to stay positive during these really difficult times. Let's keep the music and the joy of music in our hearts, and just let's keep going and look forward to the future, all being together again, making beautiful music.
What a gorgeous way to end. Diolch, Rebecca. Hwyl.
Diolch.
Hwyl. Ta-ra.
Bye.